Good morning.
Morning, you okay?
Yeah, good yourself?
Yeah, great. I'm just going to mute myself. I need to phone my other person to make sure they're okay.
No worries, no worries. Morning.
Can you hear me?
You're quite quiet.
Oh.
Wait a minute, it was a bit better there.
Is that better, Kirsten?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, good. Right. Morning, Louise.
How many presenters have you got joining this morning for the checks?
So there are 2 from Short Lees. Do you mean from separate machines, Kirsten?
Yeah, just how many people I'm expecting here, just so we don't
Right,
wait.
so there's Liz Angus, myself, there are 2 from Short Lees, and I think there's only 1 machine from Stonelaw High.
We'll give them a few minutes, it's still early, we've got absolutely plenty of time.
Okay. Oh, and there's Tracy as well.
Morning, folks.
Morning,
Good
Tracy.
morning.
Hi.
You following me?
I know I'm following you, Kirsten. We've been in every session together.
Oh. We're just waiting a few more people and we'll just run through the checks with everybody.
Okay.
Nice to meet you, Tracy. I get my memo every week, so it's nice to meet you.
You
From
too.
a
You too. Yes. Morning, Lorna.
Morning, Lorna.
Good morning, folks. How are we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Good.
there's
Thanks.
Susie as well. Good to see you, Susie.
Hi Lorna, good morning.
You all set?
We are, yes, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. Bright and breezy. Got my coffee ready.
But wait a bit.
Let me just pull up the presentation. We've got no videos or anything to share today or this morning, so
Lorna, Lorna, that's in both the presentations there are videos embedded that the schools are running.
Let me just check. Oh, right, I better do that differently then. Hang on a wee second. Pull that down again. Let's see.
We don't have any videos.
Oh, right, sorry.
Oh no, I just mean in this first presentation.
Has somebody got 2 logins to Teams running, so we've got a really bad echo?
I've only got these ones, Susie, from you and Helen.
That's right.
And then afterwards I'm just doing a Q&A with Andy. Catherine, I'm not sure, are you in the right place? Are you maybe in the wrong room?
Health and wellbeing.
Ah, now there's another health and wellbeing session running at the same time.
That's fine. So
Louise
Louise and I are in the wrong room then, I think. Okay, we will leave. Bye.
Sorry about that.
Sorry. No, I'm sorry. Bye.
Glad we cleared that up just now.
Yeah, because I think the first one, there was 2. One's about health and wellbeing post-pandemic, I think.
Yes,
And
you're
then
right.
this one, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we just have, our slides are very straightforward. We went through them all yesterday. They're just slides and we're just going to talk to them, and then it'll just be a Q&A, and the echo has gone, so that's good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just quickly run through how the session will run and what we've been doing up until now, what's made them quite successful. So obviously we're just doing all checks here. We're just getting you to share any content, just to double check that your sound there, your camera is there.
Can I just say before you go on, sorry to interrupt, Helen should be here, so I'm just going to text Helen.
She's
Helen's
here.
here. Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't think my eyes are working yet, Helen. Morning.
Morning, Helen.
So what we'll do is people start to arrive just before the 8 o'clock start. So at that point we'll just all go on mute and I'll go to put cameras, keep your cameras on or switch your cameras off, ready to start. But kind of at that point all kind of technical checks are done. If people start to join shortly, I'll pop a message in the chat just explaining that we're doing our technical checks and to come back just before 8 o'clock. And just as people start to join, I'll pop another message in reminding people to switch off their mics and their cameras. That will ensure it will just be you guys and your content on screen. And if I hear people coming in, there's still mics going, I'll put another reminder on there as well. It's a great way to start off as well, just to remind people again, your session is being recorded and will be available on the portal afterwards. It'll be next week. But again, it's really important then for the mics to be off so you get the best quality in your recording. In terms of you guys, you'll all be on screen and you can jump between each other and stop sharing your content and reshare between each other, so that's fine. In terms of questions and answers, just encourage people to use the chat panel. And actually what's been working really well is really encourage people to participate using the chat. Some of the sessions yesterday had lots of chat, lots of reactions, and it kind of feels like you're in a room with people and not a big empty space. And I think it's really good for the delegates as well. So really, really encourage that throughout the session. And again, questions get posted on, and by all means, you can take those questions and get the audience involved. Your numbers this morning, I'm just going to check. Let's see, I'm just running the report while I'm speaking. You have 532 people noted interest in this session. However, there was about a 50% drop off yesterday in most sessions, so I would expect to see probably around about the 200 mark. On that, you potentially have Mr. Richard Lucas joining your session. He didn't join any yesterday, and he didn't even log into the portal. I'll keep an eye on the session. It is really, I think in this one we would encourage them just to go with chat and no mics for questions, just in case. And if he does join, and if there are any comments in the chat, I will remove them from the room if we feel what's put in is inappropriate. But as I said, he didn't appear yesterday, but today's a new day.
Kirsten, I was just chatting to Gillian about it today and had said that he hadn't logged in yesterday. She said that the instruction that we got from DFM at the physical event last time was to allow him to ask a question, and if he persisted, so if he asks a question, then we politely ask him, and it's inappropriate, or he makes a comment that's inappropriate, then we politely ask him just through the chat not to post any more comments like that. If he persists in doing it, that's when we remove him. So it's kind of one strike and you're out.
Yeah.
But we do give him a polite warning not to do it. So that's the approach that she would like us to take.
Okay, and particularly if he goes on mic and on camera, then we can remove.
Who's this person?
He's in the Scottish Family Party, and he has got some quite controversial views on lots of different areas, and he's commented quite recently in some of the resources that we've been involved in specifically, and he was a bit of an agitator at SLF in 2019, so he might not come. As I say, he signed up for about 4 sessions yesterday and didn't even log on to the portal, did he, Kirsten?
No, he's not joined at all.
So he might not be here, but it's just to be aware of it.
How nerve-wracking for you all.
Well, it keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, Kirsten and I will look out for that and deal with it. And if there's anything that you are uncomfortable with, just put one of our names in the chat and we can just pick that up, and we'll take that as a sign that you're uncomfortable.
Excellent. I love that. We've got bouncers in the room.
Yeah.
That is funny. Well, it's not that funny.
Fingers crossed he won't show.
Yeah.
What a great day yesterday, Tracy.
It was
And
really good,
Kristen,
wasn't it? And
fabulous day.
the
Really
chat on
good
Twitter
feedback.
was really, really good. I mean, everything seemed very positive. So yeah, delighted with it.
Yeah, I was leading a session yesterday at the end of the day, and it was really positive. So I was asking people, you know, how's your day been, and what have you, you know, where have you, and people were saying it was really good to be able to dip in and out of different sessions, and even though they'd not signed up for a session, they were sneaking into sessions, and and they said they wouldn't be able to do that in a normal SLA, so they really liked it. And I loved the picture on Twitter yesterday of somebody chopping their onions and peppers.
I know.
They were making their dinner while they were watching.
While they were watching, the critical conversation, yeah, absolutely. It's been really good. All the feedback has been really positive. Interesting though that everybody tells us that it would be better if we did these things out of hours, but the ones out of school hours are the ones that have been least popular. Not in terms of pre-registration, but in terms of people actually turning up. It's the ones during school hours that are the busiest. So we'll see if that trend continues
that's
today.
really interesting, isn't it? That's
right.
it's just that like to work and just that time in between work and home or whatever. It's maybe just, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see if that continues today.
So we've certainly found in terms of training people online that we have been able to engage with stakeholders that we would just really struggle. So we're in regular conversations now with the Western Isles and Orkney and Shetland, you know, just very easily back and forward. And you can just, it's actually worked really well for us. And we have been taking like pre and post knowledge and confidence ratings and workshop ratings and comparing them with face-to-face pre-pandemic training, and it's almost slightly better. The remote training for whatever reason.
And I think it's, I mean, when you look at a lot of the really positive chat on Twitter, it's from local authorities that might not have been able to engage with SLF in the past, so they are a bit further afield. So it's really nice that the opportunities there. There's an equal opportunity across the whole of Scotland now for people to be able to engage. So I think that's really nice. So it's all good.
Helen, I'm not sure I've heard you speak yet. I'm just wondering, do you want to check your mic just to make sure it's working?
My voice will come online about 9:30 this morning.
Is that okay, Helen?
Yeah. Oh, yes. And then I was just thinking about backgrounds and stuff if it's going to be recorded, so I cleared the decks a bit more than normal. But yeah,
I've just blurred mine. Do you think I should does it look okay?
Yeah,
I don't have a corporate one, so Tracy, you're not. I'm okay with my background, haven't I?
I think that's nice, Lorna.
Yeah, we'll be fine. I think what we don't want is for us all to look too corporate or too samey, so it's nice to have a bit of variety in there.
I sometimes have fighting cats in the background, so I've made sure that's not going to happen this morning.
So can I, sorry, I was, I got distracted by an email that came in, which is now turned off. With the sharing of the slides, I presume they won't look like they currently do.
So I will, hang on
That's it, okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's grand.
So I'll go back to the start. So that's what will look like, Helen.
And is Andy joining or not?
Yeah, he's got kids to get to school and things like that. So he will join us when he can. But he won't be on until 8:30 anyway. And if there's any issues with him coming, we'll just extend a Q&A with us, and I can talk about how you can use it in the school if there's any issues with Andy not making it in. I did a session yesterday with the child protection session yesterday, and the first presenter couldn't get in. So thankfully somebody else was deputising for her, and she was able to fill in because there's no way I could have done that part.
Yeah. It's amazing what you can do with a bit of adrenaline, Lorna.
Oh, believe me, I know.
I'm going to go and get a coffee then, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Susie,
All
feel
happy?
free.
Yeah, I'm going to go and
So-
check on my, because I'm flying
Yeah,
solo
we
this
both
morning.
have children who need to go to school, so we'll just check on them as well.
Yeah.
No worries.
So
See you in a bit.
just
Alright.
back here at 5 to, is that okay, Kirsten? Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect.
Okay.
I'll keep an eye on it if anybody
That's
comes
great.
in.
Okay. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye, folks.
Good morning to those that have... Oh, got a wee bit of feedback there. Susie, I wonder. I think that might be it. Thanks, Susie. Morning to those of you bright and breezy joining us. Just now, we'll be getting started at 8 o'clock prompt. So in the meantime, if you want to grab yourselves a coffee or a tea, please feel free to go and do that. So I'm just delighted that your connection into the session has worked. You've managed to make it in beside us today. And we'll get started around about 8. Thanks, folks. If you want to just pop your name, who you are, where you're from, and what's your interest in this session this morning into the chat. Any questions that you might have for us today, feel free to put that in as well. Good morning, Andy.
Good morning. Sorry, I'm a little bit late, folks.
That's okay. As long as you're here, that's all that matters.
Well, I'm here in spirit anyway. I may have to be jumping out to get my kids as well at some point because they're currently, well, they should be getting dressed. They better be getting dressed.
So my son, Andy, he is in bed with his entire school uniform on, lying there, and his shoes are in front of the front door next to his bag, and I'm hoping that that's sufficient.
Yes, that's fine. That's fine. You've done your part. Top quality parents, Susie. Well done.
How many have you got, Andy?
I've got 2 wee girls.
No.
They're 7 and 8. Although in top quality dad style, I realised that I've been telling everyone my oldest was actually 9 when she's actually 8. And I only realised this when I went to minor ailments to get her something, and I gave her date of birth, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. No, that means she's 8. I now know why some people get tattoos of the dates of birth of their kids, you know.
Andy, isn't it 8 going on 18 anyway?
Oh, yeah.
So Andy, you're not on until 8:30 anyway, so
Right.
You're absolutely fine.
Excellent. Good stuff. So in the meantime, would I just close my screen down?
No, you can, well, if you would prefer to do that, absolutely, if that's what you would prefer to do. But obviously I'll do an introduction at the beginning, so
Right.
yeah, so I'll do that at the start.
Hang about for that then.
No worries.
Like I say, I do apologise if they come bursting in here. It's like one of those kind of things you see in the news with them in the background.
We've all been there.
Okay.
It's great as well because we are recording the session, so we can share that on social media, trying to make money. So
That's brilliant.
You keep going with that.
That's excellent. That's just what I needed to hear before we started, Kirsten. Thanks very much.
We could get on the 6 o'clock news. My boss would be delighted.
Cue them up.
I've been relegated to my bedroom here as well because they're in the main part of the house. I was wanting to have like the bookcase up behind me and stuff, you know, all that. But
Oh, that's funny.
Starting to get delegates joining us now. Lorna, at 8 o'clock, just go ahead and start. Don't wait for a cue from me. Just start bang on 8 o'clock.
Brilliant. That's great, Kirsten. And welcome to those of you who have just joined us. I can see the numbers are starting to come in just now, bright and breezy on a Wednesday morning. So yes, as Kirsten says, we'll be getting started at 8 o'clock. So please just use your protocols this morning. Just make sure your microphone's off. and that your video is off, just helps us with the broadband. And use the chat pane for any chat if you've got any questions in relation to anything that our guest speakers are saying today. Be delighted if you tweet as well. But while we're waiting for others to join, please feel free to go into the chat pane, let us know who you are, where you're from, and what your interest in this session is today, and if you've got any questions for our panellists today. Thanks. Morning again to those of you that have just joined us. We'll be getting started just in a couple of minutes, but just usual protocols this morning. Just make sure your microphone and your videos are switched off for our session, and just remember to use the chat pane if you've got any questions or any comments for our panellists. Thanks, folks. We'll get started shortly.
Good morning, it's Frances Jordan from St Thomas's Playgroup here. I don't seem to have the chat function this morning. There's something I can do.
Frances,
Kirsty,
oh, sorry.
easy. Sorry, there's a little bubble at the top. There's a little speech bubble at the top.
Yeah, I don't seem to have it today. I've got the wee hand thing and I've got the participants list, but I don't seem to have
Click on the participants and see if it comes up. There is, in Teams yesterday, this was doing this intermittently. It's not something we can actually control, unfortunately.
I'll maybe go out and come back in again.
Try coming out and come back and it might appear then. Thank you.
Yeah, because Frances was in our session yesterday and it was absolutely fine.
We've had it here in the office as well with a few sessions, and there's no kind of rhyme or reason. I think it's just Microsoft Teams.
Okay, everybody, I think that's us at 8 o'clock, bright and breezy on a Wednesday morning. Thank you so much for joining us today for our session. Just going to go through some of the usual protocols this morning before we get started for the main part of the session. If I could ask you to please make sure that your microphone and your video are switched off. And it just helps with our background noise interference and the bandwidth as well, because obviously there's a lot using the SLF today. Also, if you've got anything you would like to say this morning, please use the chat function to make a comment or ask a question of any of our panellists. If you've got any technical issues, use the chat function, or if, like one of our delegates there, you can't actually use the chat function, then just pop your hand up and hopefully we'll be able to help you. If you lose connection, then please don't panic, just come back in using the same link that you had. And obviously we would love for you to be using social media this morning, and if you would like to tweet about your experience, please use the hashtag SLF online, and most importantly, to make sure that you enjoy the session today. So just a reminder, mics off, videos off, please. We are recording this session. The sessions will be available from next week in the SLF portal until the end of November, I think it is. So yes, so just videos off and mics off. Thank you very much. That's much appreciated. So the session this morning, what do we need to know about the mental health and well-being of children and young people? And when we talk about that, we're really looking at the knowledge and skills that staff working with children and young people, not just in school settings, but across the board in Scotland, and what are the knowledge and skills that they should have to support the mental health and well-being of children and young people. And absolutely delighted this morning to have Susie O'Connor, who's from the Psychology Directorate at NHS Education for Scotland, or affectionately known as NES, and also have Helen Bradford with us, again from the Psychology Directorate at NES, and also got Andy MacDonald, who's Deputy Head at Kirkriggs Primary in Glasgow, who's going to share some of his thoughts and experience around using the knowledge and skills framework that from our NES colleagues. And I guess finally, should probably introduce myself. My name's Lorna Aitken. I'll be facilitating this session this morning. I'm a Senior Education Officer in the Inclusion, Wellbeing and Equalities team here at Education Scotland. And again, just a quick reminder before I pass over to Susie and Helen is just videos off, mics off. Any questions that you have, pop them in the chat function, and please do enjoy our session this morning. And I'll pass over to Susie and Helen. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. As Lorna's just said, I'm Helen Bradford from the Psychology Directorate at NES. And Susie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, so I'm Susie O'Connor. I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm the lead for early interventions at NES. So I lead on the workforce that coordinates the delivery of the Let's Introduce Anxiety Management LIAM intervention, if anyone is familiar with that. And it is lovely to be here this morning with you all.
Great. So I'm just going to lead through a kind of presentation that talks about the work that we've been doing in NES with colleagues across the whole of the children and young people's workforce to really try and answer that question that Lorna put, which is what do people need to know about mental health and young well-being, and then thinking of that as the basis of and how are they going to get to know that. So what we've done, and this is where I'm going to do my Chris Whitty impression and ask Lorna to change the slides. If you can move on to the next slide. Thanks, Lorna. So this came out of the CAMS task force, which is thinking about just the broad children and young people's workforce. What levels of skills and knowledge do people need to be able to support our children and young people? And the purpose of that is to be really clear of what people need, and then for that to be built upon by commissioners, by educationalists designing courses to really inform the development plans of staff and help standardise the mental health and wellbeing language across the whole of Scotland, so we all know what we're talking about, so we can work together to meet the needs of our children and young people.
So I'm just sorry to interrupt you, Helen. I'm just thinking about what you and I were talking about last night, Helen, which is that we are really familiar with all of this work, but that when we first began thinking about it, it was baffling. And I swear it took me about 3 weeks to get my head around the structure of it. So we're really keen that people ask questions in the chat, because it really did take me ages to get my head around the structure of it. And also I think that in our different agencies, we come up with phrases and words that we use all the time that make perfect sense to us and maybe don't make so much sense to colleagues in different agencies. So just if there's anything that we say that isn't familiar or that you'd like to know more about, we're really keen that this is an interactive session. So do just pop all of your questions in chat and I will keep an eye on them. And we're quite happy to chat back and forward, aren't we, Helen? And it might actually be easier to explain this if we have a good bit of chat back and forward. Sorry to interrupt you, Helen.
It's right. And moving on to the next slide, Lorna. So what we started at was, first of all, is trying to get a good group of people that represent the workforce, which include, and we had fantastic engagement from across the piece, including Lorna here, but we had so education, CAMS, social care, third sector organisations, people from the Scottish Government, Education Scotland, educational psychologists and colleagues in NES as part of the process, where we came together and just thought about what are the things that we all need to know to be able to support our children and young people. We also, in the next slide, we were able to engage with children and young people themselves. And I think the question that we pose that's posed to them is, what do they need out of the adults that work with them? And this is what they came up with, just thinking about those core human characteristics. I'm sure some of you will be familiar with that idea of having one good adult, and this is about what that good adult looks like. What are the things that they can do? And I think this is really, in many ways, really reassuring, because these are all things that hopefully everybody in this room can think, actually, this feels within my grasp to be that person, to be understanding, to have empathy, to listen, to be trustworthy, approachable. And I think that is one of the things that this framework that we'll be talking about really does capture, particularly at the informed level, of being able to meet the needs of well-being within children and young people is within the grasp and the skill set of all of us. So moving on to the next slide, this is really about thinking what we were doing is we wanted to be pulling together lots of the frameworks and things that already existed. This wasn't about rewriting anything. This was about drawing together and weaving together a lot of the work that's already exists in the field. Some of these I'm sure the people in the room will be familiar with, such as The Promise, which is about thinking about children with care experience. Some of these are probably things you've never seen and we wouldn't expect you to, which are around kind of the frameworks for specialist services within child and mental health services. But all of these are woven together within the framework we've presented, but not repeated. So if there's something that strays into the field of child protection or trauma, we've highlighted it. We've tried to incorporate it rather than just rehash it or redo it. So these all exist still. I think the thinking of things of how we've structured this and how you can understand. If we move on to the next slide, it's really thinking about how we think about knowledge and skills within NES and with all these frameworks is understanding that people have really different roles and responsibilities in relation to working with children and young people, and that changes the extent of what people need to know. This isn't about saying that everybody needs to be a mental health specialist. This is thinking about, if you are a mental health specialist, what do you need to know? And so these are what we call them 4 practice levels, and they're thinking about, in the role that you're doing within your job, what are the things that are key for you to know. So we have at the informed level, which is really about thinking about everybody that comes into contact with children and young people. What are the things that they need to know? And then moving on to the skilled level. So those are people that have more intense interactions with children and young people, including a component about their mental health and well-being. Then it's enhanced that people are having contact in relation to a mental health or well-being difficulty, and then up to specialist services. So we kind of know that that takes a bit of getting your head around. So I'm going to talk through a vignette which hopefully explains that a bit more. And Susie, I hope you're keeping an eye on the chat here, because this is where often we do have questions, and we're more than happy to try and explain this a bit more. So Lorna, if you can introduce Laurie, that would be great.
It gets a bit like a Rubik's Cube, I think, now, all the different dimensions of it.
So what we wanted to think about is really highlight how the practice level is referring to the person working. It's not about the level of intervention a child needs, because a child can actually be supported by lots of different adults working at different practice levels, each of which can be as fundamentally important. So it's not that the specialist is more important than the person who's in an informed role. It's just that they have different roles. And hopefully this becomes clear with Laurie. So Laurie's 13 years old. He struggles with friendships and gets anxious about transitions and change. He's not coped well with the move to secondary school. He's no contact with his dad, and his mum struggles to manage his behaviour at times. Laurie potentially receives mental health and wellbeing support from a range of professionals in his life. That probably sounds like many of the children that you are working with. And at the next slide, we're thinking about, so his English teacher. So his English teacher thinks of themselves as being at the informed level. That's somebody that Laurie trusts and can confide in. They supply important relationship-based positive experiences for Laurie by listening to him and then empathizing with his emotional experience. So we can see that actually that's a really key, important person for Laurie. And then moving on to think about the person at the skilled level. So Laurie's pastoral care teacher. So that's the person at skilled level, named person, key contact within the GERFACT framework. And their role is that they've signpost Laurie's mum to a local positive parenting group. So then they have a responsibility to know a little bit more about what are the resources out there, what would be a good fit for Laurie's potentially in this case. Then moving on to the enhanced level. So Laurie's got time with his school nurse, who delivers anxiety management sessions at the enhanced level with coaching from a member of his specialist CAMS team. So this we can see at the enhanced level that the school nurse has specific responsibilities in relation to mental health and well-being, but is delivering a kind of manualized approach which is formalized, but with specific support and coaching to support them to do that within their setting. And that's a kind of extended role. And then moving up to specialists, Laurie's on the waiting list for a neurodevelopmental assessment with a specialist level service, which may be a neurodevelopmental service or a CAM service or any other service at that area. Can I just do a quick sense check? Do those practice levels make sense to people? Yeah, I can see some nods for people that have got cameras on. I don't know if there's any comments in the chats. Yeah, okay, that's great. So that's how it's structured.
That's great. Yes,
fab. And I think it's really important to clear that what we're not saying is we've not specifically assigned them to job roles, because depending on the context where people work, those responsibilities will vary. So if you're depending on what school you're in, the responsibilities of the teachers will vary, depending on whether you've the school nurse with access to this additional training, it will vary. So that's really just thinking about what your role in relation to mental health and well-being is. I'm going to so the next one, I can see we've got Andy here. So I think I'm going to maybe ask you to, if we'll skip the next slide, Lorna, and then move on to this one. So this is where the document that we're talking about is available. So this is available on TURAS, which is the NES Health and Social Care platform. If you follow that link, you'll get straight to it. You do not need to sign up to it in any way. You don't need to register. It's open access. And Susie, I think you've put that link in the chat already. So we'd really encourage you to go and have a bit of a dive around that.
So we have a question, Helen, from Mr. Garrick, who's saying, is the expected level of a teacher to be in the informed level, with guidance teachers being at the next level up? That's a good question.
I think this is a conversation really to have within your school about how these responsibilities are mapped out within your school, I would suggest. And maybe, Andy, that's something that you can pick up on as well. So I think it's really about coming back to that question within the context I work. How much of a responsibility do I have for mental health and well-being? And I think what we're thinking about, and maybe by looking at the framework and looking at the kind of knowledge and skills we're suggesting at each level, that can also help you unpick which level you think you're working at.
So we're not meaning to be prescriptive at all in terms of job roles. So this is very much about your own local circumstances and conversations that you have with your line manager, for example, or whoever you talk to your CPD about what's actually happening in your role and what you're needing to do in relation to children's mental health and well-being. So it isn't so much, I'm a pastoral care teacher, so I should be at this level. It's more of a conversation in context, depending on the demands on you in relation to mental health and well-being.
Yeah. So the next slide, I think, shows how the rest of so within the framework, we have divided up, and this was something that we talked about a lot with the steering group, just thinking what are the kind of topic areas that help us think about children's mental health and well-being, and this is what we worked with. So with our first two dimensions, so that's thinking about children's development and attachment and mental health in children, young people and their families, are really knowledge dimensions. They're thinking, what do people need to know across those levels? And within them, they've got lots of sub-dimensions. And again, I'd really encourage you to have a look at this document. So within child development, there's a bit about what do people need to know about the importance of play across all those levels? What do people need to know about developmental tasks and transitions? Similarly, within mental health, what do people need to know about that interaction between mental health and development, or the relationship between physical and mental health? So then within the next three dimensions, engagement, containment and communication, identification and understanding of need, and supports and intervention, that's got both the knowledge but also the skills. What do people need to be able to do? So within, if we go to the next slide, Lorna, this is an example of one of the tables. And this is about emotional containment. So thinking about what does somebody need to know about that, and what do they need to be able to do? So if we're looking at the informed level, we're thinking about people need to know, everybody needs to know the importance of identifying and understanding the emotional communication of children and young people, and not be overwhelmed by it, and not be overwhelmed by it. And what skills do they need to know? everybody needs to be able to be empathetic and recognise that the feelings of distress in children and young people are real. So hopefully, again, those are things that people think, yep, that actually I do have, I am able to do those things. And you will also see that how it this gets built upon through the practice level. So at the specialist level, we're talking about thinking about structured therapeutic approaches and the technical knowledge around that, and being able to work across systems and agencies to manage strong emotions and risk and complexity. So we can see how this theme about dealing with emotions stretches from the informed through the skilled enhanced up until the specialist level. And then thinking about, if you can move on to the next slide, Lorna, this is an example of one of the tables with the supports and interventions dimension. This really builds on the knowledge which is captured in Dimension 2 about mental health and well-being and mental health in children. And the skill here is about being able to talk to families about so psychoeducation, which is being able to give information about mental health and well-being. So at the informed level, we're talking about being able to talk to children and young people about mental health and well-being. And when we're moving to the enhanced level, it's about being able to talk to people about mental health specifically in a helpful and easy understandable way. So you can again hopefully see that as a progression. So any questions at this point that we want to take, or before we move on to?
So there's one question from Mr. White, which says we have a positive relationships policy which weaves together restorative, nurturing approaches, self-regulation, etc. With the significant increase in mental health concerns due to the pandemic, should we have a separate policy for mental health which would include what you've been discussing, or wondering if we can weave this into our existing positive relationships policy? And I suppose I think,
yeah, absolutely. Is you know, the answer to that is 100% to weave this through, and hopefully when we come on to have our discussion with Andy can help to exemplify how, you know, you could be using this framework, but also how you could be linking it in with some of the other resources which have just recently been published and have just come, you know, they've been worked on in the last few months. So for example, we've got the mental health online training, which is just made available as well. And we've also got the whole school approaches to mental health and wellbeing. And both of these, we've got other sessions at SLF to share information about that. But I guess looking at it as that bigger picture, 100%, I would see this as being woven into your PRD process, your conversations with staff as to where they feel their gaps are in their professional learning. You know, I would be absolutely discouraging from having yet another policy when actually it's linking in with the fundamentals of that relationships policy that you already have within your school. Hopefully that helps answer that one.
I think it informs and adds detail to policies, Lorna. I was thinking that it almost hopefully operates to demystify what you need to know and be able to do in terms of actually enacting any such policies, I would think. So it's a tool, it's a tool. It's not a separate piece of work, it's to help.
Yeah, and hopefully it's about us as a group having done a lot of the hard work of just answering that first question, what do people need to know, and then being able to use that as a basis. So moving on to, we just wanted to introduce a little bit about what we're doing next, which is, as part of the group, people were then going, asking us that question of, so what is the training out there that can help us do this? Because there's actually so much available. And then, so what we're doing is we're beginning to map the asking providers to put forward their professional learning resources and programs, and then we're mapping them to the workforce. So moving on, to the next slide, what we're wanting to do is be able to give you a resource that will help you answer these questions, which is, and I've got a member of staff that needs greater knowledge and skills on emotional containment. What quality assured training is there available? Then also to be able to answer the question on the next slide, which is, I've got a group of staff all at the informed level, what training is available for them? And then finally thinking about, it may be from the other way, that I'm sure you come across lots of different trainings and you're thinking, so I'll give an example, which is the NEST training about trauma. So I'm considering rolling out sowing seeds for my workforce. What topics and dimensions do this cover? At what practice level is it? And is it quality assured? Because we're really keen that, again, to hopefully do quite a lot of the work for people, so that you know that if you're looking through this, you've got quality assured training that you can understand how it fits in the big picture, so that you can make some really good decisions about what's helpful to support everybody. And how we're going to be mapping the quality is using these three areas, Lorna. That's the next slide. So when we're thinking about the quality of resource, what we're thinking about is, does it have good usability? Does it have clear learning outcomes of which I'm sure as educationalists yourselves, you will be all over, what's the point of it? And is it specified? So if I go on the training this week and my other member of staff goes on the training next week, have we learned the same thing? Because so that's what we mean by usability. Then thinking about supports. So we're really keen that people are not in the scope of train and hope, thinking about, actually, if I'm running out this training, how do I make sure it fits what I'm doing? Is there guidance on implementing it? So, how do I choose which staff to go on it? How do I measure whether it's been useful at all? And thinking about, actually, some trainings have that really well supported and built in, and that will be good, so that that when somebody else asks you, you've just spent all this staff time doing this training, has it been worth it? You can be confident to say, yes, it has. It's going to make a difference for the children and young people that we work with. And the final thing that we'll be assessing is in relation to, is it built on current good evidence-based practice or theory? Is it robust, or is it just somebody's idea? And we will be putting forward assessing trainings to make sure that they are built on a solid foundation, so that you can feel confident in the content that is being put forward. And the final thing we're going to talk about is, Lorna, on our final slide, is thinking about is when we've got this together, is to give you some support on how to consider the need of what training needs you have, the capacity. Sometimes you can have an amazing training, but if it takes so much time out of people to do it, actually it's not going to be doable. And does it fit for the context that you're working in? Again, some more guidance on accessing the impact of training, but also information on the common learning platforms, because I'm sure you will also all be very, very familiar with Glow, but maybe never come across Churas before. Our colleagues within social care maybe are not familiar with Glow, just so that people so again, thinking about how we pull everything together so it's going to be as user-friendly as possible. So that phase 2 is underway at the minute, but the actual framework, which details what are the knowledge and skills that people need across those 5 dimensions, across the 4 practice levels, is currently available on Churas, and we'd encourage you all to have a look at it and hopefully make use of it. So that's the end of my chat. I think I'm handing over to Andy, unless people have any questions first at the minute.
I don't see any other questions in the chat function just now, Helen. So I'll, I think that might be you. If you got your, thank you very much. Just a little bit of feedback there. Oh, there's a really good question. What is Turas, Helen?
Turas is the learning platform that we use in NES for all our things. So it's probably quite similar to Glow. It's a learning portal. And yes, and there's, I can see another question. Just the framework is for anybody that works with children and young people. So whether that it's, I would see it going from whether it's support staff within schools, so there are receptionists, dinner ladies, absolutely early years nurseries, because you have a really key part of the workforce. So it's anybody that works with children and young people in any capacity.
Thanks, Helen. That's 2 for the price of 1 there, just at the end. Fantastic. No, that's great. And if you do have any more questions for Susie or Helen in relation to the actual framework itself, or the process that they've gone through, or the next steps, then please pop them into the chat. But for just now, I'm just going to have a conversation with Andy McDonald, who, well, Andy, tell us a bit about yourself and where you're from and what your role is.
All right, thanks, Lorna. Hi, everyone. My background is predominantly in behavioural needs and additional support needs. I worked 5 years in a behaviour outreach support service, and it was an amazing kind of introduction for myself into the heart of multi-agency. You know, I found myself working weekly with social work, health, educational psychologists, and charity organisations, but also really involved with families. And it was a fantastic start for myself because it allowed me to think differently about how I could support the children that I've been allocated. Unfortunately, due to that time, due to the kind of low expectations that were around some of the pupils I worked with, that actually allowed me to think quite differently about how I could support them quite creatively. Because of that, it meant that there was a lot of creativity involved through a no-blame culture. So it was a real fascinating start to it. And then I moved on to become a principal teacher of inclusion at Darnley Primary, and that's got a visual impairment unit. And then on to St Roch's Primary, which has got a hearing impairment unit. So I was kind of working my way around the senses there. And then just before the summer, I've moved on to Kirkgriggs Primary, which is a standalone additional support needs unit. We have a roll of about 53 pupils, and we have some complex needs. It's profound autism, children with profound autism and behavioural needs. So it's a hugely challenging role within there to kind of support our staff and our parents, but it comes with incredible reward. So this is certainly an area of interest for myself based on my career so far.
Excellent, thanks, Andy. That's quite a career so far, absolutely. So next question for you is, how did you find out about the NES framework and get involved in being with us today, here today?
All right, well, that's as I said, well, this is in mental health is certainly it's an area of interest for myself. I've been involved in a number of projects over the last years, so it's all something that I'm kind of following. So it's mainly on social media, but also the fact that yourself, Laura and I used to work with each other quite some time ago. So she's been spamming my social media feed with everything that she's up to in her job. So I really found out from that. But there was a working party that was established looking for practitioners' feedback based on the work that had been created so far in the framework. And it was to work with our NES colleagues. So I was asked to join that. I think that a kind of pleading email was sent out to a number of people, and I was lucky enough to get on board with it. As I said, it's a passion of mine, so I was delighted to get involved. But I think anything that delivers a shared understanding of a child or young person's needs is a good thing across all the different sectors. So Yeah, that's predominantly how I got involved. We had a couple of working party sessions, and I kind of jumped on the bandwagon of all the great work that everyone else had been doing.
Brilliant, really helpful, Andy, thank you. And I know that as part of the West Partnership, you were involved in some of that work as well. So I guess thinking about it as a senior leader in a school, how do you see your school, or how do you see potentially other schools or settings using the framework to enhance the staff's knowledge and skills of supporting the mental health and wellbeing of children and young people?
Sure. I see it, Lorna, predominantly being used through our school stage intervention process. So if a concern had been raised regarding a child's mental health and wellbeing, we can use this framework to identify the class teacher's current skill level for providing that support. So perhaps they are currently at an informed level, and I'd imagine most certainly within my setting, most teachers and senior leaders within the school would be at an informed or skilled level. But perhaps if a particular occurrence, the teacher is regarded as informed at endings or transitions, and then meaning that the child would possibly need from a member of the senior leadership team to provide further assistance at a more skilled level. But perhaps then you can use this framework for schools to identify gaps in knowledge and skills, and where to evaluate that we need to involve other professionals at a more enhanced or specialist level, perhaps some of our health colleagues, educational psychologists, speech and language, etc. And we would do that, access that through, well, in Glasgow, we would access that through our stage intervention meetings, or perhaps our joint support team. And I think you would also use it when we have your regular reviews of pupils who have additional support needs throughout your setting. You're reviewing with the parents and any agency that are involved with them, so that so we have an understanding of where those gaps are. I think I would also, as a leader in our school, I intend to use it through this year as part of our PRD process, and that would use this to identify perhaps some individual training that's required for some of our teachers. But then I think I've already been looking at it, and some of the same things are coming up. So what I would then use that as a way of, well, perhaps this is involved in a more whole school approach that we're requiring just now, and we'd use that framework to identify that, or perhaps even at a whole school community level. Getting our parent council in and the other agencies that work closely with our school to see if there's anything that across the board that we're needing that the skill level of others, or that we need to up level our own. I think, as Susie kind of said earlier on, I think we, within all our different sectors, we use acronyms and phrases and words that are particular to ourselves, and we do it quite a lot, and you're always conscious of doing it when we're working with parents, to try and avoid that. And then when it leads to us all getting together, it can slow things down. I think this speeds things up. This is an opportunity to identify what the gaps are and do it more effectively. And I think it just brings that a bit of cohesion to it and creates a real team around the child more quicker.
Brilliant, thanks, Andy. And I know that you've just said, how you're planning on using the framework. I'm just wondering, is it something you've shared with staff yet, or is it something you've kind of touched on with staff yet? Because I know that obviously, given the current situation, we're very busy with lots of things, but I'm just wondering if something, I know you've obviously got those ideas how you're going to use it. I just wondered if there's anything that you've already used it, how you've used it so far.
Right. Well, I mean, I would love to be able to sit here and tell you, Lorna, that I've been able to focus on quite a lot of this, but the reality is we are at Kirkriggs, we are like every school just now. We are focusing on mitigating the impact of COVID on our children and our families at this moment in time. The start of this session has been quite challenging regarding issues for our families and our children and staffing as well. So I'm at a very early stage, to be perfectly honest with you, because we've got to focus on that. The life of the school comes first. However, health and wellbeing is on my remit, so it is something that I have introduced to our working party. We've discussed it briefly, but this will take time to embed. This approach and using the language that's within this framework, it will take time for everyone to get used to that, and you want to do it right. So we'll certainly be using this as our session goes on, and ultimately I would like to see this being included as part of our school improvement plan. And I think, Lorna, you've already identified many of the other things that are out there for that as well, for the supports for education that could be linked in with using this framework.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And I think it's really important that we, highlight the realities of just now, and all credit to you, the fact that you are eager to use it within your school, but realistic as to how it can be used for at the moment, given the current situation. But delighted for your enthusiasm to use it moving forward. So really appreciate that, Andy. Helen, do you want to come back in just now?
I got a question for Andy actually, and I wondered whether one of the functions, or whether you had experience of, in some ways it's quite, as well as highlighting gaps, it highlights skills that people already had, because I suppose I think we can often fall into the trap of just thinking about what people don't know, and sometimes it's really helpful and important to highlight all the skills and knowledge that people already do have. And I suppose I'm just thinking about the really tough time that schools are going through and have been, and that this is in some ways hopefully also supportive to reassure people that they have lots and lots of skills that are massively important to the well-being of children and young people. Yeah,
I totally agree, Helen. And I think it could also, as I described, talking about our joint support teams and our stage intervention meetings, I think the opportunity to work with other schools and other professionals and identifying what the skills are that we have within our own establishments and how that can be tapped into by others as well, because we absolutely want to be sharing all that good practice that's out there on another skill level. I think from my chats previously with Lorna, I actually think there's probably the need for a shared understanding of children and young people's mental health and well-being has never been greater than the last 18 months. I think a document that allows professionals to look at the promotion of well-being and the prevention of mental health difficulties is absolutely a welcome and timely one. Over the past 18 months, we've worked with a significant number of children and their families who have struggled with the isolation, the transition back, financial concerns, and all these increased levels of anxiety can damage young minds and deny opportunities for success. So I think it's really important that we have this document out there.
Thanks, Andy. A really valid point, very well made. I'm very conscious of time. I'm aware that our time will be up just in 1 minute. Susie, have you just got one final comment you want to quickly make before we finish up?
It's just a reflection, really. Thanks, Lorna and Andy. What you said there really resonated with me, and I think across children's services, everybody is really feeling very pressured around about meeting the needs of children and young people's mental health, and it is emotional toil and heavy work at the moment. And I think that one of the things that this framework unpacks a bit as well is the importance of that idea that you can't pour from an empty jug, and how important it is that we look after ourselves as professionals doing this emotional toil. So that idea of what supports do I need to keep me well in my work as I do this emotionally heavy labour, if that makes sense. I don't know if you've had a chance to think about how I think it's important that we all think very hard about how to look after ourselves so that we can help others, is my point, really.
Brilliant. Thanks, Susie. Again, another very good point and very well made just at the very end of our session. Can I just say a huge thank you to Helen, to Susie and to Andy for joining us this morning, sharing the knowledge and skills framework and their experience of how it could be used within a school or a setting. Apologies, I think we're going to have to finish up just now. If there's any further questions, I'll just be here to check the chat. But thank you so much for joining us for this session. Very much appreciate your time this morning. There's other sessions going on around whole school approaches to mental health and wellbeing, and looking at the self-evaluation frameworks. And we've also got a session on trauma at lunchtime today if you want to come and join us for that one. So thanks again, everybody. And thanks again to Helen, Susie and Andy for your time today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Helen. That was great. Really appreciate your time this morning.
Well, thanks for the invite, Lorna. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, that was fantastic.
Yeah, keep me in mind for others, all right?
See you later.
Well done, everyone. At the peak, you had 111.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kirsten.